8 mice were placed inside a perfect world. 4 males, 4 females, unlimited food, unlimited water, no disease, no predators, no threats of any kind. 5 years later, every single one of them was dead, and not one death could have been explained by a vet. You've probably heard this story before. Overcrowding, right? Too many mice, not enough space, chaos follows. That's the version everyone tells. It's wrong. And the real answer is a stranger and a lot more uncomfortable than too many mice. This is Universe 25. Stay with me because the actual explanation didn't show up in the headlines. It's sitting in the scientist's own paper, in his own words, and almost nobody quotes it. In 1968, an American scientist named John Calhoun built what he called a paradise for mice. Soft nesting material in every corner. Temperature held perfectly stable. Cages cleaned by hand on schedule. The mice themselves were the healthiest specimens from the breeding colony at the National Institutes of Health. Calhoun was an ethologist. For 2 decades, he'd been chasing one question. What happens to a society when nothing is hard anymore? By the time he built Universe 25, he'd already run 24 versions of the same question. In a quarter-acre forest in Maryland, in barn enclosures, in laboratory rooms, different animals, different setups, always the same design, no scarcity, no predators, no escape. And every single time, he saw the same pattern. Population explodes, violence spikes, mating distorts into something hyperactive and strange, then collapse into apathy, then the colony dies 24 times. Universe 25 was supposed to be the clean version, the final answer nobody could argue with. He built it inside a federal research lab in Maryland, a 9-foot square enclosure with apartments stacked along every wall, connected by mesh tunnels running floor to ceiling. Calhoun called them walk-up apartments, feeders that never ran empty, water bottles that never ran dry. By his own math, the space could comfortably support around 3,800 mice. It never came close. Day 1, 8 founders go in, the lid closes. For the first 104 days, almost nothing happens. The mice explore, learn the geography, sort out who sleeps where. Then the first litters arrive, and the population starts doubling. Every 55 days, twice as many mice as before. By day 315, more than 600 animals are living inside, climbing over each other on the ramps, sleeping in piles, jostling for space at the top of the towers. This is where it starts coming apart. In a normal colony, when population outgrows the territory, the surplus leaves. They emigrate. They find new ground somewhere else. Inside Universe 25, there was no new ground. So the young males with nowhere to go and no role to fill started drifting into the center of the enclosure, forming listless pools of bodies. Calhoun would stand above the pen for hours watching them do nothing. No fights to win, no females to court, nothing to defend. Healthy, well-fed, and completely without purpose. When one of them got attacked, he wouldn't fight back. He'd just absorb it, stand up, walk a few feet, and lie back down. But not every male went quiet. A second group formed at the same time, the opposite extreme, frantic, indiscriminate, moving through the enclosure faster than anyone else, forcing their way into nests other males were defending, skipping every courtship ritual the rest of the colony still followed. Undeterred even by violence, the females responded by disappearing. The ones who couldn't find a place in the social order climbed to the highest apartments and lived alone, stopped interacting with males, stopped reproducing. And then Calhoun noticed something he'd named the behavioral sink. Even with food equally available everywhere, the mice crowded compulsively around a handful of specific feeders. They wouldn't eat alone. The presence of other mice had become so wired into the act of feeding that an empty feeder, no matter how full, was useless to them. So crowding got worse and worse in a few spots, while most of the enclosure sat untouched. Then the mothers started to fail, and not in a small way. Defending a nest in that environment took constant work. The males who'd originally claimed territory grew exhausted from patrolling and stopped protecting their families. So the mothers had to defend the nest themselves while still nursing. Some turned on their own young. Some abandoned pups in scattered spots around the enclosure. Some stopped recognizing which pups were even theirs. In the worst stretches, mothers ate their own offspring. In parts of the colony, fewer than 1 in 20 newborn mice survived to weaning. Calhoun would later write that by this point, the social fabric of the colony was effectively dead. The bodies were still alive. Whatever had held them together as a functioning species was not. The pups who did survive were raised by mothers who barely cared whether they lived. They grew up with no model of what a functioning life inside this place even looked like, and when they reached adulthood, they did something Calhoun had never seen before. They never fought, never tried to mate, never engaged in any social behavior at all. They ate, slept, and groomed themselves over and over. Their fur stayed immaculate because they never got into a single fight. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. Externally, they looked like the healthiest mice in the colony. Functionally, they were already dead. No interest in reproducing, no capacity to socialize. They'd developed inside a world where every social role was already filled by someone else. So they simply opted out of the species. On day 560, the population peaked at 2,200. It would never go higher. The last successful conception happened on day 920. After that, no new mice were ever born again. The colony kept aging. The beautiful ones kept grooming. The secluded females stayed in their high apartments. Violence carried on in pockets, with no purpose left behind it. One by one, the mice died of old age, with nothing coming up behind them. On May 23rd, 1973, 4 years and 10 months after Calhoun sealed the lid, the last mouse in Universe 25 died. He wrote that the mice had died 2 deaths. First, the death of the spirit. Then, years later, the death of the body. When his paper came out, the world ran with the obvious reading: comfort kills. Abundance kills. A life without struggle destroys itself. The image of the beautiful ones, flawless, groomed, quietly extinct, became one of the most cited metaphors of the late 20th century. Urbanists used it. Religious leaders used it. Politicians on every side of every issue used it as a warning about modern decay. That reading isn't what Calhoun actually said. His real conclusion is sitting right there in the paper, in his own words. For an animal as complex as a human being, a similar collapse wasn't just possible. It was logical if the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeded the number of roles actually available. The killer wasn't comfort. It was the disappearance of meaningful roles. When the population outgrew the supply of roles the colony could offer, the mice with no place simply stopped functioning. The fighters had nothing to fight for. The mothers were defending nests no one helped them keep. The young grew up with nothing they were ever expected to inherit. The structure that gave each individual mouse a reason to participate in its own species, that's what evaporated. The food never ran out. The water never ran out. What ran out was something nobody thought to build into the paradise in the first place. Comfort didn't kill them. It just removed the friction that made being alive feel like something. And here's the part almost nobody quotes. Calhoun wasn't a doomer. He spent the rest of his career not predicting the next collapse, but trying to prevent it. He kept building new universes, kept changing the variables, kept looking for the one thing he could put back into a paradise that would let it keep working. He believed it could be done. He believed humans could choose differently than the mice did. As physical space contracts, he wrote, the only way forward is to extend ourselves into conceptual space, into ideas, into networks, into the work of building roles that didn't exist before. He called it ideational generativity, a long phrase for a simple idea. The way out is to keep making new reasons to be here. The experiment is still sitting there in the data, a perfectly designed paradise. 8 mice, 5 years, a complete extinction, and a cause of death no toxicology report could ever name. The mice didn't have a choice. We still do. What happens next is on us.